Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and I am very, very excited to be with all of you on this sunny Friday morning in the great state of Maine. Welcome. We have a great topic and great guests that I'm excited to introduce you to in just one second. First, though, I want to just say happy graduation season, everyone. One of the benefits of if you choose to engage in social media is sometimes we're finding out about major milestones of friends and family that we may not be in touch with as often. And I'm completely inspired to see all the amazing photographs and announcements of people who are accomplishing all kinds of major goals right now with regards to their education and furthering their professional development. And one example of that is we just recently concluded our Leadership Institute for Executive Directors, who just finished. And two of our guests are alumni of our Leadership Institute for Executive Directors. And I happen to know that some of our people who are Zooming in today, who at least I think some of you, maybe one or two of you, if you are out there, would want to name yourself in the chat box. But MANP does have a Leadership Institute for Executive Directors, and we are taking part in the graduation season. But a reminder that if anyone's interested in learning more about the Leadership Institute for Executive Directors, please take a look soon, because the deadline for that is coming up. And I'm sure one of my colleagues will put the appropriate links and deadlines in the chat box in just a second. But I am super inspired by people who are achieving their goals for education and professional development. And I also just want to extend a hearty thanks to all of you who are supporting those people who are achieving their goals. Friends, family, colleagues, it really, really matters. So thank you. If there's somebody in your life who you've been supporting as they achieve their goals, I really just want to also acknowledge your commitment as well. So thank you. Okay, enough of that. Now on to our topic. We want to talk today about the results of our member survey. We were able to identify some key themes that are impacting this sector, both here in Maine, but through our relationships with the National Council of Nonprofits, we also know that we are not alone here in Maine with regards to the challenges that we're experiencing, particularly coming out of 3 years of extraordinary circumstances. And one of the major concerns, as we'll talk about, has been, what do we do now that the government funding that has been very supportive, and many of us have benefited from the PPP program or the employee retention tax credit program or other types of grants that have come through the government. Many of us are talking both at the state level and the national level what it means to not have that support anymore. And so that's among the topics. We'll be checking in with 3 guests from different parts of the state. We have Aroostook County, we have York County, and we have Hancock County. Oh my gosh, I didn't prepare myself. Making sure. Let's just say Presque Isle, Ellsworth, and Kittery. Hancock? Anyway, Nick will tell me in a second. Okay. And so we're going to be checking in with some of our members to see how they are dealing with some of the major shifts and how we are accommodating, because the stress of the services haven't gone away, and yet the funding is changing dramatically. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on a colleague of mine who knows a lot more about the member survey results, and that's my coworker, Katie Manter. Good morning, Katie. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Jen. It's wonderful to be here this morning to chat about the member survey.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I said, you have a much closer understanding of what we've been finding out about the survey. But I wondered first if you could help ground all of us on what exactly is the member survey and why do we do it, just to provide a little bit of context before we go into some of the findings.
Of course. So we conduct the member survey every single year, and it has 2 primary goals. The first, of course, is to gather feedback on membership. But the second is really more what we're focused on today. And that is, it's a chance for us to hear what's top of mind for all your organizations, both so that we can make sure that our programs, services, and advocacy are really focused on how we can support all of you, but also so that we can help share and amplify your stories and experiences to both funders and policymakers. But we're really proud and so grateful just for the high level of engagement that we have in the survey every year. So this year we had about 500 organizations who participated and shared feedback. So just first of all, thank you to anyone on the call who took the time to complete the survey on behalf of your organization.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Katie. So what are some of the main takeaways that we're learning from the survey so far?
Of course. So today I'm just going to highlight just 3 of the takeaways that really focus on and connect to the topic of today around resourcing organizations. But I do just want to let you know there was a lot of really rich information in the survey, and we've put together a blog post that has a lot more detail, graphs, charts, if you want to dig into the data that we'll share at the end of the session. So I encourage you to take a look at that. But really, kind of the first takeaway and the premise of why we thought this session would be particularly relevant for so many organizations is the way that nonprofits are resourcing their organizations is shifting, and it's really uncertain. And in the survey, organizations were reporting that they were seeing an increase in demand for their services. They're seeing an increase in expenses, yet the funding for their organization is not keeping pace. And this includes individual giving, it includes foundation, government funding, and corporate funding. The second takeaway really relates to this, and that is that our sector is struggling to retain and attract its most important resource, which is, of course, its people. And so on the survey, many organizations reported that one of their top challenges was recruiting and retaining staff members, board members, and volunteers. And in the comments, a lot of organizations also shared with us that this creates just a really challenging cycle for their organization, where it's really hard for them to maintain momentum and relationship building around gathering and maintaining funding because with this high turnover, and that in turn, with uncertainty and shifts in how they're funding, it's also hard for them to then recruit and be attractive to bringing on more people who are critical to carrying out the day-to-day of their work and also securing more resources. And then really the third takeaway from the survey is that there is a lot of opportunity for improvement in the relationship between nonprofits and the government. And in particular, nonprofits who receive government funding mentioned on the survey that they had real challenges with state contracting, whether it was late payments or approvals that made it really challenging for them to carry out the day-to-day of their work. And for example, many of them mentioned that it was really hard for them to ramp up compensation to help bring on, to operate within the current market and bring on the folks that they need to do this work and resource the organization.
Yeah, a lot of big stuff. Well, thank you, Katie. I really appreciate it. Our member survey is something that we really use quite a bit, right? And how it helps us guides us as a team to really figure out. So can you just name that a little bit, and when people might want to look for it, because we do them annually, right?
We do it every year. So it'll come out next January. You'll hear from me again. And again, we'll share that blog post at the end. But I also just want to invite all of you that that's one opportunity to gather feedback, that we are always here. We love hearing your stories, your experiences. As I mentioned, so much of this is so that we can then help share and shine a light on what is going on to both policymakers and funders to create more change. So please always feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the staff.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Don't go too far, just in case you never know, we might have a pop-up question for you.
I will be here. Do not worry.
Thank you, Katie. And yeah, let me just encourage people. Many of you have been at MANP Connects before, and sometimes our chat box can just light right up. Right now is also a really good opportunity. If some of the things that Katie mentioned resonate for you, feel free to use the chat box right now and let us know if there's any particular theme that she mentioned that is resonating for you. Because again, as Katie said, we receive this information and it's really important to us. And that's actually something, before I invite our first guest, Nick, on, I want to just provide you a little bit of, hopefully a little bit of reassurance, even though I know how hard it is to be doing what you're doing on the ground. We're going to have examples of that with the three guests of people who are dealing with keeping their organizations afloat and meeting the needs and the desires of their communities firsthand. And I know how challenging it is. At the same time, I want to acknowledge the fact that we're here to help you deal with what's at hand and the challenges at hand. At the same time, we're taking a look at the whole system. And we acknowledge if we pivot in one direction, and we're here watching all of you working on the ground and providing necessary services and supporting cultural organizations in your communities that are bringing the joy and community that we so desperately need. All of the services and programs that you're all doing on the ground, we're looking at those services and we're trying to provide you with the support you need to be successful. At the same time, we pivot and we turn and we look backwards into, or however, I'm not going to do a very good job with my visual analogy right now, but the point being, we are looking at the system in which you're working, in which we're all working, the social infrastructure, if you will, of our country. And we know that is not optimal. We recognize that the structure that we're all working in has major flaws. It has discrimination in it. It has it's marginalized communities. There's all kinds of reasons why it is not an optimal system. And by taking the stories and information that you guys share with us, we can share that with other leaders in the state, as well as our partners in Washington, D.C. at the National Council of Nonprofits. I am fortunate enough to have been asked to serve on that board recently. We're very connected to the National Council, and another MANP staff person, Mary Alice Scott, and I will be headed to Washington, D.C. in June for a National Lobby Day on the Hill, and hearing about what you're all working on, finding out through our survey and through anecdotes, through chat box like today, or any other way, as Katie said, for you to contact, is really critical, because we know we can try to support you with the services for your immediate needs, but we also want to be looking systemically, and we want to be letting the people who can help us make change at the systemic level understand that just getting by day to day is not sufficient. We have to start looking at ways to tackle some of these bigger, broader issues in more creative, innovative ways. So I just want to name that. It's a very, very complex world. I know and empathize with the challenges that many of you are facing. So we are here for you. We appreciate you being willing to share your stories. So after all of that, I do want to now turn to Nick Turner. He is the executive director of The Grand, which is a community theater space up in Ellsworth. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Good morning. Hello. I'm okay. I'm good.
And Nick is a graduate of the Leadership Institute for Executive Directors. Are you not?
I immediately wrote in there what an excellent program that was. I am a graduate and I'm still here, and look at me. It worked. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What's on your mind? How does all of this resonate with you?
All right, I made some notes.
Great.
So I'm going to start with the first thing is always do surveys. So I do every survey that comes across, and because I think what you just mentioned is so important, that you're only as strong as the information you have, especially the Maine Association of Nonprofits. So the more surveys and the more communication, the stronger you are, and the more a better ability you have to help. So information is crucial. That's why I always do surveys, and I always try to meet with people and talk about all the issues. The Grand, it's such a weird thing. So the Grand luckily survived through 18 months of being shuttered. and a huge amount of credit goes to the PPP, which was wonderful. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which was very specific about venues like the Grand, it really saved the Grand. But we're still under the burden of an EIDL loan. So we took out a $150,000 loan immediately just to save the Grand at the very beginning. And although it's a very low interest rate and a long period of paying it back, and very grateful for it, we still have that burden to rebuild, not only under financial strain, but it's an 85-year-old building. So we have, one facility thing just guts any sort of operation funding we have just in one fell swoop. So those things are top of mind, especially very optimistic about the audiences that are coming back, great programming, great community. And what is the future going to hold for that? What is the future going to hold for? We saved it with a lot of help and donors and organizations. And now what's next? How are we going to keep going?
So, Nick, what has changed fundamentally?
My awareness. So I think my awareness has really changed fundamentally within that time of really digging into what keeps something like the Grand going and what's all encompassing around it. So my perception has really changed. So more than ever before, I made some notes of the things that we're really involved in. Advocacy. So for the first time this year, I've testified in favor of or against bills at the legislative level, and I highly encourage everyone to keep your eye on that. And when you see a notice, make sure you send in a note or something about this bill. It's numbers, right? It's all the people that respond. That's what gets legislators' attention. If something goes to the legislation and nobody shows up to comment on it, I can't imagine it's important. But when they pop something up like no sales tax for nonprofits, and they get buried in please, I have to believe they're going to respond. And then all of us kind of benefit. Comprehensive plans have become, we all have our strategic plans, but now my awareness has gone beyond just the Grand into the community, into the state, into what is everyone's next 5 to 10 year plan, and how does the Grand fit within it? So I'm very aware of that, and even to the point where I'm on the steering committee for the Ellsworth Comprehensive Plan. So I think that's the biggest thing. One last thing that I think I told Katie is I'm very pleased with the program we're doing. We're doing more and more diverse programming, but we're bringing in a lot of families are able to afford and come to things we're doing. I'm hitting a barrier of how much revenue the Grand can make. So unlike a lot of nonprofits, I'm learning the Grand is maybe unique in the fact that about 70% of our funding I can cover with revenue, with tickets and concessions. But even that 30% gap is a struggle. And it may be where Ellsworth is located. There's a lot of philanthropy around Ellsworth, especially on the island. There's a lot of money on the island. There's a lot of money in Bar Harbor, but I think everyone sort of forgets about the Grand. So my donor level is extremely low, and I maybe it's my fault, but I just think it's people aren't aware of the Grand in that manner, and maybe we're being too successful in programming, so people are thinking, they're fine. We're not fine. We're not fine. The only way I can see the ability to improve revenue is if you've ever been to the Grand, very tiny lobby, no air conditioning, right? So those are the big things on my list. If I can get air conditioning, expand the lobby for concessions, I can improve revenue. but it's getting to that point.
Well, and then what's so key about the performing arts, the nonprofit performing arts, right, Nick, is that you also want to make sure, as you said, you want to make sure your ticket prices are accessible. So
That's
it's not, that's where the real mission, community engagement, community benefit comes in, is that,
Yes.
you know, if we had if we wanted to just completely put prices to cover all costs, right? You know, it would shut
Exactly.
out a lot of people who, for whom access to the arts is life-changing.
Exactly. We still keep our student prices at $3, and it's been
Yeah.
that way for, I think, 30
Yeah,
years.
and that's huge. And speaking firsthand, full disclosure, my senior is graduating from high school, hence the graduation nod. And music school education outside of public school has changed her life. And so just a little personal PSA there for the importance of the arts in our community and that part of our nonprofit sector. Before you go though, Nick, I do
Yes.
want to know, did you find, you talked, so you received a lot of government support, which is what many of us did, MANP did as well, very, very critical so that we could continue to keep people unemployed when we had to shutter so
Yes.
many of our services. And now you are embracing advocacy, which of course is trying to maintain in a different direction, but maintain that relationship and build that relationship with our government officials.
Yes.
Are you finding that are people a little more receptive to the message, having seen what happened in particular to our performing arts organizations, in that you were the first to close and the last to open? Are there some glimmers of hope there that the advocacy and the relationships are paying off?
100%.
Great.
100%.
And what's the key
yeah.
message that you're finding is most successful?
And I think it's been consistent, is that something like the grant belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
It's everybody's. And I think one of the messages is, if it is everybody's, it's everybody's also should be motivated to keep it thriving. Right. And that's the biggest thing, is it belongs to everyone. And as long as we're doing good things, it deserves support from the community and from civic and everybody. And I think the thing I'm really bumping into the most is perception of, I think I'm still dealing with perception. Like, oh, they're back, they're thriving, the lights are up, there's people everywhere, they're fine.
Right.
And then I have $20,000 going to a window repair.
Right.
Right. That it's just like that. One last thing, I'll pop into you too, and is I think I may be wrong, but I would love to see more funding from foundations and everybody for operations. And I think we're still working under a misperception that, you know, operations is, oh, you're just filling your pocket, right? It's just administrators filling their pocket. Well, something like the grant, if I don't pay people to do it, we don't do anything.
Right.
So operations is so vital, and there's not a grant out there for operations that you can get.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Nick, and I would support that. MANP supports that idea. We want people, we have a vision for the sector that includes providing providing individuals with good career options,
Yes.
competitive pay, fair pay, you know, any kind of support, government support, where however supports received, but that supports the true costs of doing business, which means more than adequately paying our employees so that they want to and can afford to commit their passion for their communities in their profession. So
Yes.
100% support that. Thank you, Nick. I
Oh,
am going
thank
to
you.
move on now to Sherry Locke.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks. Bye, Nick.
Bye.
Sherry, are you there?
I am.
How are you doing? How's Aroostook County? How's our sunniest Sunshine County?
Beautiful today. We actually had snow on Wednesday, but
What?
it's going to hit close to 70. So it's a beautiful day here in Aroostook County.
Well, I did did have to end up moving some of my plants inside down here in Portland too. So you're You are not alone. Sherry, how are things up at ACAP? You guys are a big agency covering a really huge territory, important part of our state. I'm always amazed by what your organization is responsible for, and supports people in a variety of ways to make sure they have their basic needs met so that they can be successful out there in our communities. What are you thinking about this morning, given the topic that we've been addressing?
All the things, Jennifer. And as I listen to Nick speak, I think of how different we are, but how similar we are. The operation costs, the keeping the lights on, and you're correct. I mean, ACAP is one of 10 community action agencies in Maine, and we have a large budget. I mean, millions and millions of dollars, almost $30 million last year. So many of our funders, state, local, and donors think we're okay. You know, we have 17 locations throughout Aroostook County. And don't see the way that they can support us. Really, a lot of folks think of us as a quasi-governmental agency. But at the end of the day, we are seeing the biggest increase that we have ever seen for need, with rising food costs, rising energy costs, and then the reduction of all of these pandemic programs. I mean, the reduction in SNAP, the sudden ending of the LIHEAP program this year. It ended sooner than it typically does. All of these things that are ending, these pandemic dollars ending, but the need is the greatest that it's ever been. So how do we continue providing those services, those high quality services? And again, just like Nick, we need staff, that we can pay, wages, competitive wages, offer benefits. We have to pay our staff so they can take care of their families, so that they can then in turn take care of the community. And it's just that challenge. It's just that, continuing to educate the community, continuing to educate our funders, that just because our budget has risen, it doesn't mean, it's not filling anyone's pockets. The need is so great. And at a time where our expenses have grown drastically as well. So it's that cycle. And I really think it is all about educating the folks that we work with. For one, educating the community that if they are in need, please come to us and we will find a way. But as these programs have started to shrink, if you will, our staff is working even harder to patchwork quilt programs and services to meet families' needs. So with less funding, we're asking staff to do more to meet the community need. And that's a real hard place to be.
Yeah, I hear you. And you work with Jason, who's on our board. And so I hear a lot from Jason about all the good work you guys are doing. It is hard, and you guys are innovators and you're determined to work. Can you talk a little bit of recognizing that there are some major changes in where the money's coming from?
Absolutely, major changes and more strings attached, if you will, than ever. I mean, a lot of our grants want a non-federal match, which is really, really hard right now. Where does that money come from? A lot of folks that were our donors are now our customers. So, folks that used to be able to contribute to our work are now seeking services and are unable to, to support our efforts. So where does that non-federal match come from? We don't have programs that earn revenue, as Nick talked about, ticket sales and things, so when that's not there, it really limits. And I certainly understand the value of, an organization having some investment in addition to receiving those funding, but it just makes it so tough when, so many of your programs directly come from federal funding. Our approach, I think, is important to talk about. So we really don't want to be a Band-Aid. We really want to offer those comprehensive services that are going to make that sustainable change for folks. And that's expensive. It takes time. We do provide the one-off services, whether it be food or clothing, things like that, but we really need to be investing in education and opportunity so that folks can be moving out of poverty, so that folks are no longer reliant on federal, state, and federal programs. And again, that takes time. It's not like you can just, provide that tank of fuel, which is critical. We really need to be providing those opportunities for that family to move out of poverty. And that typically takes about 18 months and requires a lot of supports along the way, which again is very expensive. So while we're facing the reduction in staff, the reduction in dollars to provide these services, we know that there's a better way, but it does cost, it does cost more to provide that higher quality, sustainable service.
What can you tell me a little bit about your individual donor experience so far? I know for sure nationally, we know that certainly at the height of the lockdown and the immediate needs of the emergency, people really stepped up and became major, we're really donating quite a bit of money. What has been your experience? And then I think you and I talked a little bit in preparation for today about your messaging around that. And so just what is your individual giving experience? How has that been?
During the pandemic, I have to say at all levels, it was fantastic. And folks who had never given before realized the work that we were doing and found ways to give. And it was fantastic. I mean, if we have 68,000 people living in Aroostook County and everyone could just give $10, it would make a difference, right? So it's getting that information out and showing them that how their gift combined with that of others can make a difference in the community. I will say in the last few months, though, that really has come to a screeching halt. And again, I think it's because a lot of folks, the energy costs alone, just the hike, and, we're looking at another large hike. Folks that were able to maybe make a $25 or $50 donation just do not have that, and they're fearful for the future for their own family. So that has really stopped. Municipalities give, and they have given very strongly during the pandemic. And again, they're looking at their increased costs for staffing, for benefits, to keep their own lights on. And so it really is a trickle effect on and how that's going to happen. We have spent our time during the pandemic not only offering these services, but educating the community about who we are, what we do, how folks can be involved, how folks can come in to receive services, but how they also can be part of this solution, this long-term solution for our community. And I think that has been very beneficial. We have been able to bring in new volunteers, new programs, in partnerships, which I think are critical. The community wants to see that. But it's just making sure that we are using those available resources and stretching them as far as they will go, and building those relationships as that trusted community partner.
Yeah, that's great, Emily. And I want to make a point, and then I'm going to give you a chance to do a little humble brag in a second about ACAP. But I want to just point out that what another similarity that I'm seeing about what you're saying and what Nick's saying, and at the height of the pandemic, I was observing that. I think we were all observing this, and I was calling it out on MANP Connects about the we involved in those of us working for public benefit charitable organizations. The we is such an important frame, right? Nick said it about how he is having some success with his advocacy and in framing the grant as a community resource, as and then the hard work of having to tell the story about what that means when a window breaks. It is not a simple fix, right? And the challenge of reminding our communities, do you care about this resource enough to recognize that if it falls apart, let's not cry about it later, right? Like, let's do something about it now. And it's the same for ACAP, that I do think that oftentimes our nonprofits are taken for granted. And I had hoped that maybe out of the pandemic, we all saw how we all needed nonprofits, right? It was impossible, nearly impossible to not see how nonprofits impact everybody's life. And so this idea of framing it around, it's ours. We collectively have a responsibility and an opportunity to support our neighbors and ourselves and build our communities through the support. So I'm really inspired by both of you coming from very different parts of the state, different missions, but it's really about Maine communities and Maine people coming together. Before I move on to Emily, I do want to say, I know Jason has said this a lot, ACAP is really a national leader, are you not, in community action programs for this idea of really putting the client first?
Absolutely. Actually, Jason just attended a week-long trip to Alaska to mentor 2 other CAP agencies on our approach. And again, it's really about putting customers at the center and meeting all of their needs in the way that works best for them, not having them repeat information, not having them go to 7 different offices to get the services that they need, but really putting them at the center, working with them on what all of their needs may be, and helping them develop the best roadmap for them and what works for them to achieve their family's needs. So it is really great to be recognized for that work. We are doing it on our community and really hoping to help scale that across the nation, because that is the key to sustainable success in any community.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for committing to staying in Aroostook and supporting your communities up there. You are all doing really amazing work, and I'm thankful for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Emily, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. So what are you thinking? How's all this resonating for you?
Yeah, so we come from a little bit of a different situation, but I see lots of similarities between the 2 previous speakers. And so I'm the director of Fairtide, and we are a small, lean agency serving the very southern part of our state. And we offer housing, affordable housing, and supportive services to people experiencing homelessness. And when we were founded 25 years ago, it was really, true grassroots style, right? It was a group of people that recognized there are folks around here who are homeless and we should do something about it. So they raised money to purchase and renovate a house down here in Kittery. And they turned it into affordable housing for people in need. And so while they utilized some state funding to renovate and build the property up, we, for the last many years, have been almost entirely privately funded and supported by our community. Our founders were very smart to also open a thrift store. So our thrift store offers low-cost clothing and housewares to the community, but it really is a significant funding stream for our housing program. So, for example, last year, gross sales from our thrift store accounted for about 50% of our revenue. When you look at the net, it was closer to 25 because there are obviously costs associated with running the thrift store. But that has really been an incredible resource for us to sustain our programming and to offer that flexible, unrestricted funding to cover operating costs, for example. So that has been really critical. Of course, with the pandemic, we had to shut down for several months, and that was difficult, but we were able to tap into some of the federal money, the COVID relief funds, and the community was very generous in helping to cover some of those costs. We also feel like I'll bring back that word pivot. We also pivoted to, trying to increase our online sales and bring in, just creative and different ways of utilizing the donations we got into the thrift store to bring in revenue. So 5 or 6 years ago, we really decided we needed to grow as an agency because as Sherry was saying, the need is great, specifically for affordable housing. And we are seeing a lot more folks who are, financially on that edge and now falling off that edge because of inflation. So we knew that we wanted to grow. And as a small agency who had never really relied on that government funding, we had a focus really on how to grow through partnerships. So, the intention was, how do we leverage what we have and what our partner agencies have access to in order to move the needle? So just one example of that is we still partner very closely with York County Shelter Programs, which is in Alfred, but the closest emergency shelter in Maine to us. They have access to some rental voucher resources that we do not. And so we were able to form this really unique partnership where we can help folks who are experiencing homelessness in Kittery, for example, access those voucher resources and keep them down here housed without making them go through that system and go up to the shelter. So that's just one example of how we've kind of tapped into partnerships to utilize resources and move the needle. And then the other piece that we really started doing a lot more of is advocacy. So I appreciate Nick's comments around that. I have certainly learned how important it is to have a voice at the table. And again, just Nick, your comment about perception was really hit me because, we do provide services in an area of our state that is wealthy. Specifically Kittery and York, a lot of folks don't think there's need down here. And the truth is there is. And so I've spent a lot of time over the last 5 or 6 years locally here in Kittery advocating for affordable housing ordinances and changes. Regionally at our regional homeless council level, I sit on the statewide homeless council. So really trying to educate folks that there is need here and be a respected voice at the table to help encourage resources to go to where they really need to go and to be implemented in a way that makes sense for our part of the state. So we have had some success in that, but I think that has been really critical to making sure that we can get the resources we need to expand our housing development work, to expand our work with landlords that we do.
So Emily, thank you. And Kelly pointed out in our chat that you recently received state legislative recognition for your help supporting families in the southern part of Maine. So thank you for that, for being all three of you are incredible state leaders. It's really awesome. I think, unfortunately, we are going to be coming up on time, but I just want to ask you the question that I also asked Nick. What message is resonating most for you right now with people now that, anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, housing. I mean, I think it's everywhere. People now know, well, most people I would say now know that we're in a housing crisis, and that we need more housing in general, and we definitely need more housing that's affordable. So I actually feel like our state is doing a decent job of putting
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Hopefully partly because of the advocacy that we have all been doing around that.
Yeah.
It's going to take time though to see that make a difference in terms of increase in housing stock and some affordable housing projects that are in the works. But we have been able to access funding to build a smaller affordable housing project down here. We have another project in the pipeline. So there are more voucher resources coming forward. So I think people know that it's impacting more people, folks whose kids can't come back and live in the town that they grew up in. It's really just hitting people on all levels. So, and I just really quickly, one other project we're working on that's very exciting is, as Sherry mentioned, in order for clients not to have to bounce around to lots of different locations, we're creating a resource hub of social services down here for the southern part of the state. And it will not only allow people a one-stop shop, resource center, but it will also provide sustainability for the agencies that will be a part of that. So we own the property. We'll be able to share those costs with the other agency partners. And it's a very exciting endeavor that is going to, I think, make a big difference for our agencies in the community.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emily. This is really, we're grappling with huge challenges, and talking to the three of you really gives me the hope that we need to carry forward so that we stay resilient and stay at it. So thank you so much for being with us this morning. I am going to get us wrapped up here, so that, because I always try to promise everybody we keep it to 45 minutes, and it is a beautiful spring day. So I want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to do your hard work, but also take care of yourselves, right? We all need to make sure that we're balancing our commitment and what we're giving to our communities with some self-care too. So I'm hoping everybody gets that. But before I let you go, Kelly is dropping a link in the blog post to register for next month's MANP Connects, which will be on June 23rd. It'll be a little bit later so that those of us who are going to Washington, D.C. to meet with our colleagues from across the country can do that. Thank you again to our sponsored Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Also, not to forget the member survey, which happens each year. We also, as Katie said, take a look at that survey, the survey results and the blog post that we did. I also want to just say really quickly, we've talked about it a couple of times, but we are doing advocacy for you both at state level. We have been pursuing a universal charitable deductions, state sales tax exemption. And so we have been working on that in the State House. My colleague, Mary Alice Scott, has been working on that for you in Augusta, and at the national level, related to what Sherry was talking in individual donors, we do work with our National Council of Nonprofits on a universal charitable deduction, so that everyone, regardless as to whether or not they itemize, can benefit, just like people who have more means to give quite a bit of money who receive a tax break. We believe anyone who gives money to their community should be able to benefit from that as well. So just a couple of specific examples of the way that MANP has your back in terms of paying attention to what's happening at a local level, but we're also keeping our eye on the bigger infrastructure and the bigger ways that we can try to help shift the balance so that we all have what we need to support our communities. Thank you all so much. I hope I didn't miss. I'm not going to forget, last shout out. We are saying goodbye to one of our members today, Ellie Nazar. So much good luck to you as you pursue your career. We're really excited for you. You've been a tremendous team member this last year. We are going to miss you terribly. And now I will send you all off into this beautiful spring weekend in Maine. See you next month. Bye.